All right. Well, welcome, brother. This is Tim Baker, my younger brother, on the Noblest Pursuit podcast. My name
Yeah.
is Paul Baker, and we are just going through the what would be like the pilot pitch for what is the Noblest Pursuit. So,
Yeah. We're finally doing this. I feel like we started talking about this like over the summer.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been wanting to do some kind of podcast like this for years, probably 6, 8 years, something like that. And it just never really coalesced. But for some reason, this phase of my life, like the entrepreneurial force is feeling strong with me right now. Um, and I'm feeling like really aligned. Maybe that's what it is. It's like I'm just feeling really aligned, and I have all these different like projects that I've talked to you about. So Noble Squad and Stark Intelligent and the Foundry, this kind of like umbrella called the Noblest Pursuit with the podcast. Um, I want to do a children's book with the kids based on the Goodnight things. But like these are things that I've been talking about, thinking about for like a decade, basically. Like the Goodnight things, that's as old as Michaela is.
Yeah. Well, I think I think the forum, like a podcast, is a great forum to, I think, tell a story, and I think sometimes in order to tell a story, you have to like center yourself, and I think the podcast allows you to do that. Like as an entrepreneur, I know we'll get into this. As an entrepreneur, one of the hardest things to do is to hire your first person.
Sure.
And part of that is because you have all these ideas and the things that you do to operate your business in your head. And for you to like hand that off to somebody else, you're gonna have to like write it down or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, record it, whatever that. And the podcast is almost a forum that allows you to do this. And obviously you just threw out a bunch of things, the Foundry and the kids book and things like that. The podcast almost like forces you to create those, or to create a structure in which you're pulling down these thoughts and ideas and then you know presenting that to the world.
Right.
So kudos to you to get this off the ground and get this going. I'm excited to chat more about what it's going to look like.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been looking forward to this moment talking to you in episode 0. I actually recorded the first episode of the podcast like over a month ago with one of my proteges, Gray, and and mentioned in that episode that you and I were going to be recording episode 1 or 0, whatever I called it in that one. And then life got in the way, Thanksgiving, all that kind of stuff, and I was like, oh, I got to get this done. I want to launch Jan 1st. But it was really important to me that it was you. Um, Not to
Oh,
get
thanks,
too
man.
emotional, but like you and I have been on entrepreneurial journeys together for years now. I've done my own venture. Like remember when I did pyrotechnics out of Delaware, my first business?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
That
I
was
remember
garbage.
you had some pretty sweet. You had some sweet business cards, though, I think.
I did. Nobody knew what they were. they were so
Yeah,
they looked like something that belonged in a club. Yeah.
yeah, I do remember that. At least they were memorable, though, right?
They were memorable. Yeah, nobody knew what they meant, but they were memorable. there's still
Yeah,
probably lawyers in Delaware that were like, "What the fuck was that?"
yeah. It's like marking their book somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. But then I've had that, and obviously you have your business, and I remember the conversation where I was when I got the call from you when you're like, "I need to figure out something else in my life. Like, what do I do?" I remember I was in Malaysia. Do you remember that
Yeah.
moment?
I do. Well, I think when I pivoted my career, I had, I've had very few epiphany moments in my life, and I feel like both of them involved you in some way. The first one was when I decided to go to West Point. It was actually like, I think it was on your R day. And I think
Yeah, I
as you
remember
were
that.
as you were applying or had interest, I think first in the Air Force Academy and then to the U.S. Military Academy, I was kind of that, ornery younger brother would be like, why the heck would you want to go to a college that would tell you like when to get up, what to wear, like, you know, all of that
I
stuff.
think
I
you
mean, that
also
sounds
hated the fact that I
terrible.
just talked about it constantly. Like I remember
Yeah,
you
it's
just being
like,
like, I don't want to hear this anymore.
yeah, it's like people like their fantasy football team or, it's like the only person that cares about it is you.
Right.
So like, but then, when we were up there, I just saw how impressive the institution was, and I saw how much it centered you, just trying to figure out the Rubik's cube to get in.
Hmm.
And that was an epiphany moment for me. I'm like, I think I kind of want this too. I think I see the benefits. The second
Hmm.
one was my decision to kind of pivot my career and to go into like financial services. So I'm a
Hmm.
certified financial planner. So, I own a fee only financial planning firm, and we do financial planning, investment management. And I had a conversation with you, and this is probably the one that you're citing, and actually a conversation with our younger sister, Kathleen, um, that were oddly identical
Yeah.
in the
I
kind of the
remember you talking
message.
about that. Yeah.
And I don't think at the time. I mean, obviously we're siblings. I don't think that you guys were like talking and saying, "Hey, like
Hmm.
we should have a united front and say this to Tim." Um, but it was oddly similar in the takeaway, and I came away from those conversations saying this is how I want to pivot my career.
Right.
At the time, I was in logistics. After my military career, I became a logistician, so moving basically stuff from A to B. And then, I kind of had my quarter life crisis, and I'm like, well, I don't know what I really want to do. And I sought counsel from both you and our sister, and kind of had that same like, you know, epiphany of this is what I should do. And then I think that then parlayed into working for someone else, but then
Right.
believing like I think I can do this by myself, and I think I
Right.
can kind of build a better mousetrap. So yeah, it's been a while, but I would say that to kind of go back to your original point of like excited to have this conversation. I think in my journey you've been pivotal,
Pivotal.
that pivotal. Thank you. In and I do podcasts, so but you've been important in that journey and for me, so I appreciate it, and thanks for inviting me to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, no one I would rather have this conversation with. Definitely top 10 people in my life, somewhere near the bottom of that 10 stack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, like what you were talking about as far as engaging, kind of like finding meaning, right, in your work. Going from logistician to financial planner to entrepreneur, right? And that kind of segues really nicely into like what is the point of the noblest pursuit? Like what is the noblest pursuit? And the name of it actually is an homage to St. Thomas Aquinas. He says something. The quote is basically that the pursuit of wisdom is the noblest pursuit of them all. And I've always been one of these guys that's just been like super captured by wanting to learn, and not just learn facts, but to learn like applied knowledge, which some people might call wisdom. And so I really liked that. The logo is a side profile of Athena, which she's really special to you and I. She's the goddess of wise warfare, and her crest, you know, features prominently on the West Point logo.
That's right.
We wore her helmet every day, on our emblem, right, on our rank.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's that wisdom that I'm really seeking. And as a stoic, the Stoics have this have this concept of what we call arete, or excellence, right? So everything in life, whether it's animate or inanimate, has a mode of arete. So a dull knife is not, a sharp knife is. A sharp knife is excellent, right? A pen that writes, someone that engages with life, and is the kind of person that other people would want to remember well. That's arete. So for
Yeah.
me, the noblest pursuit. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, one of the terms, and I haven't heard you say it lately, but it's one of my favorite things that you would say. And maybe this is kind of like, tech related. I'm not a tech person, but like one of the things that you would say, when we would talk about somebody, you would say like, oh, like they're switched on.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of what you're talking about here. And I think, I had this conversation with my daughter Olivia. It's like she's 10 now, and she's such in a race to like get technology and get a phone, and like, she had I don't know if I told you this, but she had for her birthday party, her 10th birthday party, and she had a sleepover, and like all these girls came over, and we would walk downstairs, and my wife Shay had it all set up, and you'd walk downstairs, and each girl would be on her bunk,
Oh, and
like
they're just
on her iPad, like just looking at
right.
their screen.
Right.
I'm like, that
So
didn't happen when we were, and like
no.
out of the
Yeah.
8 girls that were supposed to sleep over, like 2 actually did. Like the other ones like went home,
Went home.
and
Yeah.
I'm
That's so
like,
common right now.
what that? So like not switched on, right?
Not
But I think
switched
I
on.
also
Yeah.
think about like you're kind of a zombie. But I tell this story too, not to get too tangential with this, but like
Sure.
when I was working in logistics, I was working in like a warehouse. So I got out of the army. I was working in a warehouse in Columbus, Ohio. I would get to the warehouse at 5:30 in the dark, and then especially this time of year, I would come home at 6:30 in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
those drives to and from the warehouse, which were about 30 minutes long,
Mm-hmm.
like I would get in my car, drive home, and I wouldn't remember any of the drive.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I was on autopilot, and I feel like that became my
Mm-hmm.
life. Like my life was
Mm-hmm.
on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like this type of podcast, or this like thinking, is a direct counter to that. I think it's so
Mm-hmm.
easily to switch off and be distracted by life and the noise of life and just screens and things like this. And I like, you definitely more so, but like I've always kind of been like self-reflective and have thought deeply about things. And I think this is like an homage to that, right?
Sure.
It's just to not to accept things on like face value,
Right.
but actually like reflect deeply about. And I think like a podcast is a perfect forum to do so. So
Sure.
I love like the direction that you're taking, but I just, it kind of, intertwine some of my own personal experience with, I think, where you're taking this. I think it's a great platform.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, selfishly, it's a platform for me to think, because like I think out loud in a lot of ways.
Yep.
I mind map a lot too. I sent you that mind map that you prompted yesterday. We were talking
Yeah.
about the fastest path to cash for the Stark Intelligent business, and I took that to heart, and I was like, okay, like build it, right? And sat down and mind mapped it out, and it felt really good to do that. But that wouldn't have happened had it been for the conversation. We talked for an hour and a half yesterday, just chopping it up as brothers and as fellow entrepreneurs, and then getting this scheduled. But having a forum to wrestle with big ideas and little ideas on a regular basis is like really valuable to me personally, because it allows me to kind of sharpen that sword a little bit and craft a new blade every once in a while.
Yeah, it's like another form of journalism, like journaling,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is another thing that you kind of turned me on to in past life. Like, I think it's a healthy, again, this will probably be a little bit more structured, but it's a healthy download of information as,
Hmm.
you kind of talk through and work through. And, we talk about being an entrepreneur, especially early on. It can be a lonely, lonely
Yeah.
beast
Yep.
because
And I think that
often it's
that's
just
actually
you in a
good.
room, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's good, and that's like, I told you what I felt like the elevator pitch for the Noblest Pursuit, and I'm sure it's going to evolve as I go through and I think and I reflect. But right now, after having thought and reflected for the last couple of months, basically since the summer, where I'm at is that it's the pursuit of self discovery by wrestling, really engaging with your great adventure, whatever your great adventure is at that moment, right? And I want to have recurring segments that speak to that great adventure for another person, right? Whoever my guest is in that moment, right? So, like one of my favorite, the first segment that I thought of was what I called WTF Love Dad. So it's actually not what the fuck, it's what that's fair, which is something I will tell my kids, right? I'll drop some consequence on them, and they'll be like, "Dad, WTF, Dad?" And I'm like, "No, what? That's fair, right? Like that's fair in this moment." And then I'll explain to them why it's fair, the rationale, the love and logic as to how they grow, right? But it's them wrestling with their next great adventure, which their next great adventure right now is to grow into adults. They're teenagers. Well, Kayla's a teenager,
Right.
and Timothy is soon to be a teenager, right? So having a segment to basically talk about that, and I'm going to use AI to mask their identities because I don't feel good about putting a kid on a pod like that's too Jackson 5, right? Like I'm not all about that.
Yeah.
But if they want to be into entrepreneurial business and they want to start to build a platform and whatnot, when they turn 18, if I can give them a little bit of a head start and they can see how this works, that's great too. But for
Yeah.
now, they'll appear as AI generated voices, and I'm not exactly sure how the visage will appear, but AI is a wonderful thing. We'll use it. Um,
Yeah. Well, so that was so the first so
that's
to
the
kind of
first segment.
unpack the
Yeah.
podcast. That's the first segment. WTF, Dad? Talk to me about the other five segments. So what's the next one that you're thinking about?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go. I'll just go right down the list in the order in which I like brain dump them onto my mind map. The next one was what I call ethos enrichment, and this is something that like I'm already doing these. I've been recording conversations like the WTF Love Dad conversations. I've been recording those for like a decade now. Um, and then
It's
the
a lot of
ethos
content.
enrichment, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there. Like it's really cute too because like I have one where it's probably like 4 years old, and we're talking about World War II as it compares to Exo Squad. And Kayla's like 8 or something like that. So,
Yeah.
and Timothy like always has like a rant. Like my son's name is Timothy as an homage to my brother, right? And my daughter's middle name is Bean as an homage to my sister, whose nickname is Bean. For those of you that are not aware, but my son Timothy in those recordings always has some like really funny, just random thing. Like he'll say something like, you know, like I don't even know what it is, but I'll have to figure out a way to like interject that. Like maybe that's the one place where like
Yeah.
he's being funny. It's like you take an actual voice sample and it's like pass the beans or something like that when he's like completely just non sequitur in the recording.
I'm already like envisioning the Noblest Pursuit podcast like merch store.
Yeah,
So you can
exactly.
like drop Timmy's or Timothy's one-liners. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. But ethos enrichment is also something I've been doing for a long, 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 long time. Recently, I actually started calling it ethos enrichment, where we'll do it as a form of like church on Sundays. But when I have my kids every other weekend, I put together before the weekend. I will have what is like a buffer playlist in YouTube, and I'll just put things that are philosophy or religious tradition or even science, psychology. I'll put them into a playlist, and then on Sunday I will craft a new playlist out of those buffered videos that'll usually follow a theme. And then we sit down and we
Mm-hmm.
watch YouTube together for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we discuss. So what I'll do is probably create a commentary, not on the actual like minute by minute, but on the playlist itself. So this one, this one, this one, this is what they talk about, kind of a summary, and then
Yeah.
obviously post the playlist. And the idea is that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I might have something of interest that you might want to like check out, right? So it's kind of like what's your kit kind of thing, and it's
Right.
what's your kit for a meaningful life and raising good kids, right? Um,
So with this
yeah.
segment, is it this is going to be you kind of solo on a mic, or is this a guest
That
kind of
one
guest led pod?
that one will be either me solo on a mic, or if I can find people like you or like other people that are like wisdom seeking type people that want to talk. So
Yeah.
like Jeff Picasso, right? I love the
Yeah.
fact that his nickname's Picasso. He wore a beret to soccer practice one time, and 30
Stuck with
years
them.
later, it stuck with him.
Yeah.
But Jeff and I send him the daily Stoic on a regular basis. I was doing it daily. Um, he's getting into Stoicism. I've got other friends that are really into other you know traditions that would be interesting. So, but I would love to have like a discussion group of like people like throwing in like what they think about, even if we were to do it somewhat like asynchronous, right? Like everybody takes a read of a playlist and then just drops like a comment, right? Or like
Yeah.
a short blurb, and then I just kind of like munch it together somehow. Um, but again, like the idea is not for me to be on a mic. This is how you should think. It's to say like, hey, this is something interesting. Are you struggling with addiction? Are you struggling with fixed mindset? That was a recent one that we did. And then we watched Rudy afterwards.
Is fixed the same as like a scarcity mindset, or is there a difference there?
No, there's a difference there. Yeah, there's a difference there. Scarcity mindset is when you act as if there is not enough. Fixed mindset is when you believe that your abilities are fixed as compared to your abilities are malleable and growable. Growth mindset.
Oh, I got
So
it. Okay.
scarcity and fixed mindset often go together because they're both
Yeah.
like, they both come from a lizard brain, centric mindset. Um, but there's a slight difference. Yeah. So, and it would be
So you
interesting to
guys
have
watched
like
Rudy?
yeah, we watched Rudy after watching an ethos enrichment about growth mindset. So, and it was cool because I hadn't really watched that movie with that frame of mind, but you really see it, right? You
Yeah.
really see his after his buddy's passing. You see him kind of like finally take the first step, and then from there it's just pain, 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 right?
Pain and rejection, iterate, all that, and that
Right.
those are also good lessons I think for an entrepreneur as well.
And for anybody,
Because a lot of
right?
yeah, well, but I think specifically if we're talking about entrepreneur, like most of the time when people say, "Hey, I'm going to start my own business," what's the first reaction you get?
Roll your
A
eyes.
lot of the time, it's like, yeah, like why would you do that? Too much
Mm-hmm.
risk. It's too dangerous. And
Right.
if you look at if you
Or
realize
no
the
belief
movie,
whatsoever.
yeah, like and it's funny you mentioned Rudy because Olivia has been brought it up, and I think she kind of was talking about it. I don't know if it came up in her school in fourth grade was about like limited mindset or so she's like
Mm-hmm.
she's wanting to watch it. She saw a clip, and I'm like, yeah, we need to. But like if you know that movie, it's like the second he brought that up, it's like you're Rudiger, you're 5 foot nothing, you
Right.
can't play
Yep.
Division One football, and
Yep.
I talked to and I know you do the same thing, but I talk about the conversations that you have with yourself. Sometimes Olivia will say like, "Oh, I'll never be able to do this," or "I'm not
Right.
good enough," and I'm like, if you start to say that, you start to
Right.
believe it,
Right.
right? So like we
Right.
need to not we need to avoid that, and I know it can be
Right.
sometimes it's how people voice their frustration, but that does seep into your conscious, and I think like
In your
I try to
subconscious.
police that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to police that as much as I can because
Yeah. And I think the way that
you
you
go down that
police it
path.
is the way you police it, in my experience, is you do less cleanup, more planting, right? So plant
Yeah.
more trees, worry less about cleaning up trash. If the place looks nice, people will dump less trash. Kind of that
Yeah.
approach, right?
Yeah. Or
Um,
like, yeah, just yeah, like notice in the trash. Like sometimes like when she says that, I'm like I just point it out, right?
right.
Because if you get to a place where if you get to a place where you don't even notice you're saying it, like that's a
Right.
bad place, right?
That is
That's
you.
part of the
That's and
fabric. Yeah, exactly.
right, right. I mean, and this
So
is where probably the next segment, to segue into the next segment, would be what I call the atypical suspects, right? Which is an homage to the typical suspects, right? And this is going to be me and a couple of my colleagues that are neuroatypical. So I'm
so
bipolar.
define that because a lot of
Yeah,
people don't know what neuroatypical. I actually know what it is because my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, and they talk about what that means. So
being
walk
yeah.
through like what is it? What is that?
Yeah, so neuroatypical is basically anybody that has some form of, I don't want to say disorder, but some form of condition where their brain doesn't work the way that normal brains work. So that's going to include ADHD, being on the spectrum of some kind, Asperger's. Uh, what's the other? What's not Asperger's? It's
Just autism.
autism. Yeah, thank you. Um, Bipolar disorder, depression, OCD, right? So like, there's a handful of things that would kind of put you in the atypical bucket. I don't really care about that, but what I am interested in having like a segment that's really specific to discussions and conversations around being atypical is that I believe that like someone like me or someone who has pretty significant ADHD, we're actually kind of canaries in the coal mine when it comes to the general population as far as how we engage with mental health. Uh, if you have ADHD and you are put into an environment with social media, like that creates a problem really fast. But does it not create a problem for normal people? No, it creates a problem for normal people too. They just don't notice it as quickly, right?
Yeah.
So, for me, I because I'm bipolar, I can go from high to low super quickly, and there's a lot of aspects of that power curve. The slopes on that power curve are accentuating things that a normal person still struggles with. They just don't move that fast in the struggle, right? So, but because my slopes on my power curve are so uh, high, when I'm dealing with depression or I'm dealing with euphoria or whatever it is, you can really see it, right? It's kind of like putting a tracer in a biological system, right? Like that system was always that way. It's just the tracer allows you to see it. And people like me, I believe, are a tracer, right? There's other aspects of it too that I would love to get to if this podcast becomes some kind of platform. I would love to be able to, like, big grand vision 20 years down the road. I would love to talk to Congress or the Senate about, like, why is it that people like me were drummed out of the military when I got diagnosed, right? Like, if creativity is power and you want a powerful military, do you not want creative people contributing to the planning and strategic thinking? Like, should I be downrange leading troops as a second LT? Probably not, right?
Right.
But could I be behind a drone watching and being in the ear of that second LT as an augmented, you know, voice? Yeah. I'm super creative, and that comes from being bipolar.
Yeah, and I think we've had these conversations of like if you see some of the people over the course of human history that are geniuses and have contributed, you know, there a lot of them are atypical,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
bipolar.
Yep.
I just think
Churchill.
it's, church, yeah, I just think it's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. Even if you have family members that have it, it's hard to understand than, something else that, you can point and say, okay, here's a test for cancer, or, and there's spectrums, right? Like there's a spectrum for bipolar, for depression. I think the more that we talk about it, the better. I agree with you. Like there are other ways that you can contribute that might not necessarily be orthodox, right? But, that being able to unlock that brain power, that creativity is huge. And again, bringing this back to entrepreneur, a lot of people become entrepreneurs because of their brains work differently, right? People that are dyslexic that did, that had trouble reading, or had trouble sitting in a chair, and kind of that schoolhouse, environment was hard for them. They found a path differently. And a lot of that is, building a business. And I think that, there's, I think a forum to talk about this, for people, one, to understand it if they have it themselves and know that they're not alone, but also for people that don't, and to hear the perspectives of people that do, and I said this, and, my daughter has dealt with this, we've gone through lots of different ways to kind of, but ways to treat her. But like ultimately what we've discovered is like she can be very productive and do what she needs to do. Like it's not a inhibitor.
Right.
And in some cases, like, and I think you would agree this, it's almost like it can be a mutant power, as well. Cause it's a different, you see the world differently. So yeah, I'm excited by this segment and where you take it. Walk me through the next. What's the one that you mentioned before we turn on the mic? That's Good Tech. Walk me through that one.
Yeah. So That's Good Tech, and then also Baby Skynet are kind of like sibling segments. So That's Good Tech is going to be talking about like new and upcoming or tried and true technology. You do this all the time. You always ask me like about my kit, right? Like what are you using for charging, and what are you using for, webcams and stuff like that? And I do the same thing with you, right? Like, but there are people that we know that seem to have a read on like tools, and I'm a tool kind of guy, right? So I've got a couple
you are a tool kind of guy. Yeah, that should actually be the tagline of your.
That should be the tag. So. Yeah.
yeah.
But I've got a couple of colleagues that are really into technology in general. One of them, Gray, he's into 3D printing. He's a big D&D nerd, so he uses his 3D printer to churn out orcs and then paint them at great painstaking detail.
Oh man, that's next level.
That's next level nerd right there. He's a great guy. He's one of my favorite people in the world. He's probably top 5 actually, to be honest. So
oh man,
you have
how come you didn't name your kid off after? How come you don't have a son named Gray then?
Well, because I've only known Gray for 5. Yeah, for 5 years. I've only known him for 5 years, and Timothy's 10. So you got lucky.
Got it.
You really you squeaked in there. So
slid down the chart pretty quickly there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, what it was a lot less. It was a lot less like you lost. It was a lot more like he won, and you just got forgotten, really. So
that's fair. I cannot 3D print or paint D&D.
No, you can't.
Orgs. I can't do that. I don't have that talent.
You're just justifying my decision. So
yep.
No.
Hey Timothy, we're gonna change your name to Gray. So just so you know.
Exactly. Who is this Uncle Gray? He's your new uncle.
Why does it look like his face? Like, why does it look like his face is pasted on top of another body? What's going on there?
Like from Talladega Nights. 2 Christmases. Oh man, and there's going to be a lot of that too. As you and I do, and I don't know if it's going to be annoying to the people listening, but I love references.
Probably.
I love movie references. But yeah, Baby Skynet, to circle that square, Baby Skynet's going to be a conversation with me and an AI that my team is building. So I have another venture called Noble Squad. We do software development, and we augment teams to help them learn how to do effective software development. And in our free cycles, we're going to be building AI for the other main venture that I'm leading, which is Stark Intelligent, which is a smart home automation system. So, you know, basically coalescing your smart things and putting them under a single umbrella that makes all of it work together in a smooth and efficient manner. Think ChatGPT meets Alexa without the spyware. So,
I like it. Yeah, I'm excited to see obviously the evolution of the conversation with baby Skynet, and obviously
yeah, it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be really weird.
your yeah, but your businesses, like Stark and Noble Squad, like how those tie in, and I think it's going to be great. Yeah, I
As
when you talk to me about the smart home, whatever you want to call it, home automation, I'm like, I need that. Like
yeah,
as my daughter gets older, as I'm the dad that walks upstairs and like every light is on,
yeah,
which makes
yep,
me really angry. And nothing talks to each other. Like we're like on separate systems.
yep.
I think where you take Stark is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Like we would say in the army, you want those overlapping fields of fire, and I feel like
That's right.
I feel like I got a gorgeous field of fire, the high ground.
High ground.
Yeah,
Hell, we can
yeah,
hold them off all the live long day.
all the live long day. Yeah, that's a great movie. Gettysburg, for those of you that can't
Gettysburg.
place it, Gettysburg. And then finally, the final segment is let me introduce. So, and what let me introduce will be is let me introduce, Sam Harris, or let me introduce Joe Rogan. Right? Those are big names, but I'll fill in some other ones. Those are the ones that I reached
Hey
for.
man, I looked at like my podcast. I was looking at some of the people we've had on, like like Susie Orman or Rachel Cruz. Like these are
Wow.
pretty big
Yeah.
people, and yeah, that so gotta shoot big, and I think yeah, you'll get those guests for sure.
Yeah.
You'll take this podcast places. So walk me through one of the hardest things about a podcast is consistency.
Right.
So walk me through kind of what can listeners expect from a cadence, how
Sure.
you're going to release it, is it going to be like full seasons? Is it going to be as you get it? Like walk me through kind of the schedule of things.
So for this first one, I'm going to release the first 5 episodes on January probably 3rd, second or third. I have to look at the calendar and see like when business starts back up after the holiday. And I'm going to release the first 5 episodes. But typically, what I want to do is release episode by episode, um, up and like through a season. So I'm going to do quarter long seasons. So that's 13 weeks. And I'm going to do 3 episodes per week. So I'm actually going to round it out to just go 40 episodes for a season because I like round numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what will happen is the mix will be determined based off of what I have in the pipeline. So if I have a lot of people that I can talk to, let me introduce will feature more prominently that season. But what I wanted to do was to create some redundancy and resilience in my podcast schedule because I have done this before where I've attempted to create a podcast, and one of the things that's really challenging is making sure that you have you have content that you can release consistently. So by having the different segments, if one of those is popping or not popping, I have many to pull from. So typical cadence, what I'm thinking right now is going to be Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. And Tuesday, Thursday will be more business focused, more self development focused. Sunday will be more introvert, like I don't want to say introverted, but what's a good term for that?
Are you trying to say
Introspective. Yeah,
introspective?
there
Yeah.
we go. Introspective. So it'd be more introspective. So that's going to be ethos enrichment. What the WTF, Dad? Um, maybe a little bit of the atypical suspects, right? And then the other segments will be Let Me Introduce during the week, Good Tech, Baby Skynet, and then Atypical Suspects as well. So,
And do you see like, can listeners expect kind of more of like long form of like you kind of like
yeah, it's going
Rogan
to
where you just
be,
turn or is it more like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
it's a commute, 30 minutes, you're in, you're out.
So I'm going to try and keep it somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So it's probably your whole commute there and back, right? So if you've got a, you know, 25-minute commute one way, you should be able to listen to a whole episode in a day. So, and the reason I like 45 minutes is I think 30 minutes is probably not long enough. Like we just hit 40 and I think we're getting right to the crest. Same thing. The first episode that I recorded with Gray, we hit about 50. I think we wound up going 110 because we just couldn't wrap up.
Yeah.
But I remember hitting like the climax at about 50. Um, and I think that's really typical. You have to kind of like build a rhythm. I don't want to do any kind of cutting. I might use AI to reduce things like pops, and things of that nature. But other than that, I'm not going to do any editing. It's just going to be it's going to be a podcast that's basically a conversation over Zoom. Like just the way I would like, and I really want it to be that way. I want to keep the whole like, oh, link in the description down below. Like I want to keep all that stuff to a very, 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 very minimum. Maybe at the very end, have like a little like recorded segment that basically says like, hey, if you really appreciate this, everything that you heard, anything that is pertinent will be in the description, that kind of deal. But I don't want to be like plugging and whatnot like in it the way that you wouldn't plug if you were on a Zoom call, just me and you, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about stuff. I'm cool with that. And you can mention the fact that there are people that are listening and then that context has to be brought in. But like I want to
Yeah.
keep it as conversational as like Rogan does, right? The way that Rogan does the conversation across the table is very natural and organic, and he will mention, "Oh, you got a book? That's really cool." But they're not like blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah 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 blah.
But there's
You
not
know,
like a
like
formal there's not a formal like CTA
there's no
of like,
CTA.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And I think all that stuff kind of breaks the fourth wall, and it's not the fourth wall. It's kind of like it breaks the fifth wall of emotion, right? Like of genuine connection, right? Where you just like, okay, what are you doing here? Like, are you selling me right now, or are we having a conversation? Because the two are not the
Right.
same.
Right.
So, and I want to be really intentional about that. Will I try to sell things at some point? Yeah, but not on the podcast, right? It'll be off product, off. That's a different thing, off
Yeah.
platform.
So I
So
guess one of my questions for you, um, that like, so if you describe the Noblest Pursuit podcast, like who's it for? Like, is it for like someone like you that's in tech? Is it for someone like me that's not in tech?
no,
Is it for
yeah.
entrepreneurs, non-entrepreneurs? Like if you bumped into me in the elevator, you're like, hey, what do you do? And you say, hey, I just launched this podcast. Like, who would it be for?
So I think really the podcast is for people that are interested in like in a general term it would be self-improvement. So I think like parents that are looking to develop their teenagers would be really well served by the podcast. I think people that are it's not necessarily entrepreneurs, but like people that are interested in a side hustle, right? So like entrepreneurs, business leaders, but like, hey, are you a college student that like is interested in a side hustle that needs to do a side hustle? The thing that I said is that like I want you to understand what your current limitations are, and then I want you to be able to engage with bumping up against those limitations to grow yourself, right? Like that's the conversation should be based around that, right? So like
Yeah.
what is it that you're doing to kind of like move to the next phase of your great adventure, right? Like I want to stay on that. Is like, what is your great adventure? First thing you have to do is like know what that is, and then how do you continue to how do you get it so that you're not just killing rats, right? To use a D&D analogy, right? Like you should be moving towards killing dragons,
Got it. Okay.
right?
I know what you're saying. Yep.
Right. So but I think a lot of, to go back to the switched on thing, right? You have to at least know that you're in the game, right? So I guess
Yep.
maybe that's the answer is those. It's for people that know they're in the game and want to know where to go next, and it's for people that want the people that they love to get in the game.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
those two
I think this is
audiences.
I think this is a great time of year to think about this. Like, right now we're kind of going through like our goal setting
Mm-hmm.
and review of what happened this in 2024 and what we want. Like, it's kind of a good time to kind of, so like, self-discovery through your great adventure. If you ask people on the street, like, what's your great adventure, or like, what are you working towards? I think a lot of people be like, I don't really know. Like, I'm just trying to like put
Make
food
it
on the table
survive.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep my head
Right.
above water. I'm
Right.
surviving. I'm not thriving, so to speak.
Right.
And I
And
think,
that's yeah. That's a really good distinction, a really good point. And unfortunately, I'm not really making content for them. I'm making content for their future self, right?
sure.
For the moment that they decide that they don't want to just be surviving, right? But like one of the things that I've done in my career is I'm really big on like epic adventure as a coalescing force, right? So like all of my teams always have a cool name. We always have cool lore, right? Um, like I have like a private LinkedIn right now that I call the X Mansion, and the email that I sent out was like, "Hey, I think you're extraordinary." Someone, like some might say an X Man, right? And then like I had a bunch of people that were colleagues of mine over different companies, and like they're just part of a Slack. We just chill out and hang out and talk about stuff, right? Maybe we'll do some business together. I don't know. Like, but the idea is like, I think it's more fun and more interesting. I think it's easier to have drive when you feel like you are engaged in a great adventure. Kind of like Teddy Roosevelt style, right? Like that zest for life. I think that
Yeah.
comes with having like a vision. Kind of like
Yeah.
to bring it back to the beginning of the conversation where like I couldn't stop talking about West Point, and then eventually you caught that vision and that drove you for your last 2 years in high school.
Yeah.
You know,
It can be really annoying, but then
it
also
can be
awesome at the
really
same time.
yes,
Um,
yes,
can be, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna make a joke about, Marvel is gonna come after you for like IP,
They
like
might.
stop using
I'm
their
actually going to
IP.
change. I'm actually going to rebrand the X Mansion. I think I'm probably going to do some kind of like stoic, like Acropolis or something like that.
You'll
But it
get
was a
a
good way to like, yeah,
cease
yeah,
and desist from the mouse, since the
yeah,
mouse owns it now.
exactly. That's a good South Park episode if you've ever seen that one.
I have, yeah. I need to, I need, I need to watch that again.
Get up.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. So that's basically it. That's the podcast, and a lot of the other things. So I really appreciate every chance that we get to chop it up when it comes to business. Every single time that we
Yeah,
do
man.
this, I get something from you. Um,
Same.
yeah, it's super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I love this. It's so fun.
Yeah. I love it too. And, I just want to say, best of luck with the podcast. If there's anything I can do to support you and its efforts, let me know. You're gonna do great, and I'm proud of you. I'm looking forward to listening, hearing the content, hear the inside jokes. Hopefully, I get them.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think it's gonna be good, and I'll be tuning in weekly.
cool. All right. Well, thanks, brother. I will talk to you soon. And
Yeah,
we got to get that game. We got to get that weekly game night or game lunch uh,
we do.
cracking.
We do.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's out there for the world. So hold us accountable.
hold us accountable. Yep. All right. Well, I love you, dude, and I will talk to you soon, man.
Yep, love you, man.
All right.